Let's get started with compassionate culture. What is a compassionate culture?
We often think that a compassionate culture is the external, but really and truly, we're talking about the internal, right? Everything starts internally in order for us to move around externally. And so when we think about a compassionate culture, it is how I create all spaces. It's how I lean into teaching. It's how I lean into learning about other kids. It's what are they thinking about themselves? How are they speaking to themselves internally? How are they showing up for themselves? How are they hiding? Where is their compassion? Where is their self-compassion on a scale of, 0 meaning absolutely obsolete to 10 being bubbling over and exponential, right? So we're really looking at how does the person feel about themselves? How do they view themselves? What is their level of self-respect? It's the richness behind self-awareness that allows us to move forward and to cultivate relationships and to have the power within us to use our voice the way that we want to use it and to actualize what our dreams and intentions are.
Awesome. And I'm so glad you focus right on that internal compass, right? That internal compassion for people. I'm curious, like what prompted you to create this compassionate culture? How did you get into doing this?
It happened actually quite organically. As a classroom educator, my focus has always been on the younger early childhood ages from 4 to 6, were always my sweet spot, because at that age, it's when our brains are starting to leave the space of what everyone else is saying to me is what I have to do to let me start creating my own meaning in the world. And so while they're simultaneously shifting out of one stage of development into a new stage of development, we are encouraging and fostering a space where kids can really explore how are they treating themselves, how are they using their voice, how are they showing up, and what is that like. And so the compassionate culture was really just the foundation of how I had my classroom. And so it's been an actionable practice for almost 2 decades at this point.
I love it. And I love it to hear a little bit more about like how do we teach our young people, right, to cultivate and foster this compassionate culture within themselves. And then in a little bit, we'll move on to kind of how this relates to our overall topic of right unhealthy relationships and stuff today. But can you share a little bit about how we cultivate that in our youth, how we help them foster that?
Yes, I love that you want specifics, because that's really what it comes down to. How do we put the messaging into action is really what it's all about. So when we look at, say, a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, and we see them, they're now confident on their feet and they're running around, touching, feeling, exploring. Do we tell them to stop, or do we smile and say, keep going? What did you find? Right. So the way that we interact with children, infants, toddlers, early elementary, it really sets the tone of, do we believe in what they're doing? Are we giving them the space to explore and get curious with them? Are we encouraging them to ignite the curiosity and ignite their own passions and wonderings and conversations, however they communicate, through drawing, scribbling, finding objects, using their actual words, or are we stifling them, right? And how do our interactions elevate or hinder? And so in the whole process of doing so, we're giving children the opportunity to say, oh, I really like it when my mom and dad encouraged me to go run free, and I look back and I see that they're still there, so I feel safe, but I still have that freedom to keep running. And if I run too far, my mom and dad are going to let me know that I have to stop because they're watching me. They see me, they hear me, they love me, I'm validated. But for the parents that are turning their backs to their kids as they run around, or to the kids that hear no all the time, right? So it doesn't have to be so black and white, but what we're looking at is a broad spectrum of, when is the child curiously staying focused on what they're doing out in the world, and when does their curiosity shift towards who's watching me, who's responding to me, who's helping me remain safe, right? And so having all of those different awarenesses along the way allow for the little being to create this compassionate culture. Like, I matter, I'm whole, I'm enough. And just because my parents are not watching me every 5 seconds of the day, running and doing and playing and jumping and screaming and making noise, doesn't mean that I need them to, right? I'm so strong within myself because they have fostered a safe space for me to get curious and to play and to roam and to love, that now I can do it and I don't need anyone else's validation. But it's a really important, it's both an important process, but it's also a really important practice, because it's both about how are we as adults practicing self-compassion, and how are we teaching self-compassion, and what is the process that we're showing ourselves self-compassion, and what is the process that we're teaching self-compassion, and how much patience do we have, how much acceptance do we have, what language are we using. So it's a holistic approach to really building a rich connection within yourself.
Gotcha. And I'm curious, like, right. So, right, in a perfect world, we would all have had parents who, right, did everything they could and had that right balance of between, right, like letting us go and being free, and at the same time being there for our kids always. And in the reality, right, some kids don't experience that, or some of the AVAIYA students watching right now are adults and didn't experience that as a child. So what do you see as kind of the, I guess, impacts of that? If they have a more of a selfish parent, a narcissistic parent that isn't really able or capable of helping them with that, how do you see that play out in a child's life into adulthood? Like, what are the impacts?
It's a wonderful question. So I'm really big on releasing shame, blame, and guilt, right? We can all sit here and blame it on our parents for how we are. I don't do it anymore. It's not worth it. It's a lot of energy that we all lose out on. And instead, I encourage those that are in the adult stage, where they are independent and they are taking care of themselves and they are living their life, to really get curious, what's happening in their own personal relationships. What are they doing to foster rich relationships, to cultivate honest, authentic relationships, to show up emotionally, to show up vulnerably, right? So, yes, I see the impact of how experiences in childhood have a direct correlation to how we show up as adults. However, with the brilliant science and our brains being so squishy, mushy, and malleable, and our ability to rewire and refire our neurons to really dig into our own personal desire to change, that's when adults get to say, you know what? It really sucks that that's what I experienced. That's my old narrative. That's my old story. Moving forward, my new story is going to be, I'm going to pause. I'm going to check in with my body when I feel tightness. Where do I feel that tightness? Oh, I feel it between my shoulder blades. Oh, okay, what's happening? Maybe I need to move around. Maybe I need to do some yoga. Maybe I need to go take a walk or do some breathing. Oh, I'm seeing it now move between my shoulder blades and now move into my arms. Oh, yeah, I'm about to throw something. It's that awareness, right? And we laugh about it because we're like, wait, an adult can actually recognize when they're about to pick something up. They're actually going to respond versus react. Yes. So we all have the strength, and we all have the capability, and we all have the willingness within ourselves to show the compassion to ourselves in order to show compassion to others. But it's a choice. And I say but and intentionally. It is a choice. And so if we choose to say, you know what, when I was growing up, my dad was narcissistic. I started dating a narcissist. I married a narcissist. Now I have 5 children with that said narcissist. I'm now divorced, and I am healing from being abused and gaslighted and physically and emotionally. And I'm also helping my children heal their own pain, and working through the process it's so important for me to sit here and be able to talk about, I'm still healing. My children had their own personal experiences with them, with their father. It's different from what I had with their father. Their father was my husband. My relationship with my father, their grandfather, is different, right? So it's really important that we consciously and confidently have these conversations about your story as a piece of what you experienced. It does not have to be you.
Mm.
And that messaging right there is so important because, look, not for anything. I mean, anyone in the world can look at me and say, oh my God, you're white privileged, right? They don't know my story. I'm a Jewish girl from the South that experienced a lot of trauma, but it's not who I am. It's just a piece of my story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I choose to use that piece of my story to let the world know that we have to really pay attention to conscious and unconscious biases. If we don't pay attention, we'll continue the same cycles that we've been having for decades and centuries.
Mm-hmm.
Because of my conscious awareness of what I experience as being a platform for me to talk about and to let other people know that they're not alone, and to let other people know that we can make change and we can do something different. It's so important, right? So it's how do you take your stories and your experiences and use them for you instead of against you?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really important message to teach today's youth, because living in victimhood is one of the most horrific experiences that anyone can sit in. And when we show what can happen, when we offer different, when we create different, infinite possibilities are available. And it's amazing. It's amazing to watch.